Next on Sisterhood of the Second Act.
Have you heard of Winnie Davis? Or about a group of women who have fought the U.S. government to bring their prisoner of war husbands home from Vietnam? And what do you know about former First Lady Pat Nixon? Award-winning author Heath Hardage Lee is telling history through the eyes of these amazing women. We'll talk with her about her process, her work, and what's on the horizon when Heath joins us in just a few minutes. London Ray-Dykstra saw a need and started a business. She'll tell you she had no inclination to start a startup, but she led with her heart and her values to create Hustle Haven. When London joins us later in the show, she's going to explain how Hustle Haven is not a gym, but it's still a place for people to get healthy. You'll meet both of these women on this edition of Sisterhood of the Second Act, right after this.
Looking for your first home or retirement home? Realtor Monica Nicely can help you find it. Whether you're moving in or out of the Roanoke region, call Monica 540-449-2019, 540-449-2019. Alcova Mortgage Loan Officer Jonathan Sweat helps you seal the deal with a loan to suit your needs with great rates and terms. Call Jonathan 540-314-8843, 540-314-8843.
Alcova Mortgage, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID number 40508, MLSConsumerAccess.org. Terms and conditions apply. All loans subject to credit approval.
Cabby Fashions take you from the boardroom to the beach. Dress for a garden party or a night on the town. Independent cabbie stylist Darlene Marshall will make sure you look your best no matter what the occasion. She'll bring the store to your home for you and your friends or schedule a private consultation. Call Darlene 540-330-6819, 540-330-6819, or find her on Instagram at Dapper Darling, on Facebook at Darlene Marshall Independent Cabbie Stylist.
I'm gonna be an oak tree.
I think I'll be a dogwood tree.
My kids said they'd be looking for a thorny tree for me.
With Evergreen, you can be a tree. Our biodegradable urn combines your ashes, natural soil additives, and a native tree of your choice. Be a tree and grow for tomorrow.
I want to be a tree.
Learn more at evergreenmemorialtrust.com.
Pat Lucas is committed to providing independent financial advice to individuals, families, and small businesses. Contact Pat at 540-798-8104, 540-798-8104. Securities and investment advisory services are offered solely through Equity Services Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, 4401 Starkey Road, Roanoke, Virginia 24018, 540-989-4600. Now from the Fox Radio Roanoke studios, this is Sisterhood of the Second Act.
Welcome to Sisterhood of the Second Act. I'm Denise Allen Membrano. Complicated women have been making history throughout time, but her story is not often told. Heath Hardage Lee is telling the stories of women who didn't necessarily seek the situation they find themselves in, but rise to the occasion for the betterment of others as well as themselves. Heath is an award-winning historian, biographer, and curator, and her first book, Winnie Davis, Daughter of a Lost Cause, came out in 2014. She followed that up in 2019 with The League of Wives, the untold story of women who took on the U.S. government to bring their husbands home from Vietnam. And her biography of Pat Nixon is due out next summer. Thank you, Heath, for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
You have a varied resume, as we kind of alluded to in the introduction. You're museum curator, teacher. Was writer always in the picture for you?
Oh yes, I kept going back to that. That was really has always been, I would say, my primary skill, writing and talking. Other things like adding, not so good, but those two are definitely what I'm drawn to. And whatever I did, whether it was teaching, curating, writing books, it's really all about the story and writing.
And nonfiction, did you always know that was going to be your genre?
Definitely. I am not generally a fiction reader. Of course, I think everyone should be well versed in fiction, and it's great to apply those techniques, I think, to nonfiction, which I try to do. But I was always really drawn to biographies, particularly biographies of women. And as a young really, as a kid, I realized there were hardly any, other than the greatest hits like Marie Curie, Helen Keller. You would see the same ones. And I remember as a kid thinking, where are the other ones? There are other women who are interesting, and there just were never enough of those. So I always thought I'd like to write more.
And I guess that's kind of where Winnie Davis comes in. I mean, when I saw that, I haven't read that book yet, but when I saw Winnie Davis, Daughter of a Lost Cause, I thought, I've heard of her before. How did you hear of her and decide to make her into a book?
Right. Well, Winnie was this kind of presence in Richmond when I was growing up in the 80s, I would say. Her portrait was in all these museums and clubs all over Richmond, and I used to see the portrait, because there are copies of this portrait everywhere, and wonder who this woman was. And she was very melancholy, but very regal looking. And she had all these kind of sashes and medals. And I was like, is she a princess? What is this person? So, I always wondered about her. And then I had an opportunity to do a thesis at Davidson College. I was a history major and was in an honors program, and decided to do my thesis on her, and discovered who she was, the daughter of Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy. But her story is one of trying to escape from that heritage. And so it's just a fascinating kind of Romeo and Juliet story set during Reconstruction. So I always wanted it to be a book, and at one point finally had time to write, was in between jobs, and wrote the book and sold it very quickly. So that's kind of where the writing books part of the career came from.
You mentioned the melancholy look she had,
Yes.
and as I read more about her, it seems like that melancholy look comes from all the conflict around her. Like,
Yes.
oh, don't think of me as, the Confederate cause.
Yeah.
I don't want to be thought of that way.
Right. And that was really, she really was raised in Germany in a convent and knew almost nothing about American history, but she is labeled the daughter of the Confederacy due to her parentage, and spends most of her life kind of consciously or unconsciously trying to get away from that. Becomes engaged to the grandson of a famous abolitionist, and then moves to New York and works for Joseph Pulitzer, the media baron at his newspaper. So her life is one of really trying to escape this past.
So one of those untold women's stories.
Yes.
We are talking with Heath Lee, award-winning historian, biographer, and curator, about some of the books that she has written. And so now you're moving on to another lady who we know, we've heard of, but I was thinking when I saw that your next book is about former First Lady Pat Nixon, and
Yes.
I thought, I don't really know anything about Pat Nixon.
Right.
So why Pat Nixon?
Well, just what you said, because everyone says, I don't really know anything about Pat Nixon. So that really intrigued me, because literally almost everyone I've talked to said, I don't know anything about her. She's almost like a sphinx, very mysterious. One writer called her America's political Greta Garbo, and I really liked that. I wish I could claim that I came up with that, but I don't think that's actually accurate, but that draws you in to wonder what is behind that face. What is she thinking? And of course, she's in the middle of so many political controversies with her controversial husband. But she's so unlike the media characterization of her. She was often called Plastic Pat in the later years. But doing the deep dive, that was not at all her image for many years. She was in politics for 30 years, and her image really evolves and changes. But one of the great things I hope to do with the book is kind of take apart that mythology, show you the real person. And then Mrs. Nixon was very pro-women's rights, supported the ERA, wanted to get women on the Supreme Court. Everywhere she went internationally, her goal was to lift up women. So that's something people don't know about, and some see as in conflict with her husband's administration, which is also not true. That administration was among the first to get women in high-level government positions. So it's really kind of a deconstructing of an image and some mythologies that we have.
Yeah, I know Watergate really tarnishes Nixon, but you always hear of it, how great his administration was and the things that happened during his presidency. So you researched her. What surprised you about her?
Well, you know, she's so elegant and so kind of fine-boned looking. And she was, by the way, a Hollywood sort of, I wouldn't say starlet, she was an extra and had even a speaking part in some big Hollywood films and could have gone that route. She was offered a movie contract. So she has such an elegant image. People don't realize how she grew up very, very poor from Nevada, but then moved to California as a young girl. And then she was orphaned by 18. Both her parents had died. She really had a very hard life, but pulled herself up by her bootstraps. Classic American story. Put herself through school in a time when most women didn't go to college. She ended up putting herself and her two brothers through school at the University of Southern California. So, you know, people don't really know any of that. Also, the love story between the Nixons, which people often are like, what are you talking about? So I got access to these wonderful letters from World War II between the Nixons. And I mean, they, particularly Richard Nixon, is smitten with Pat. And by the way, used to drive her to dates with other men while they were dating just to spend time with her. Wow. So very, very smitten on both sides. Of course, the marriage evolves and changes over time, but that's something else I think people will be surprised to learn or find it something they didn't know.
So in the middle of these two books, I left out your 2019 release of The League of Wives.
Yes.
Now, this book is a little different because you relied on oral histories. Do you have any preference as to which way you go? I mean, how was it different for you sitting down with these women who did a really big thing in the early 70s to bring their husbands home from POW camps?
Yeah, they really did. Now, that book, all of the books, well, Winnie, of course, everyone was dead, so there were no interviews or oral histories. But these past two books are both a combination of archival documents and oral histories or interviews. So I was able to use a fair amount of archival documents in writing League of Wives, you know, about the POW wives from the 60s who bring their husbands home from the Hanoi Hilton. So I did have that, but I would say the backbone of that book, maybe more than some other things I've done, was the oral histories with the women. And what was so interesting is these women told me, the primary women in the book on the West Coast said they'd even tried to pay someone to come and put together a book for them, but no one was interested, which just blew my mind because it was like a gem lying on the ground. It was just such a great story sitting right in front of, you know, in plain sight, which is a lot of my books tend to be that. Just it's a woman in plain sight, but she's hidden in some way. So that one, yeah, really was probably a little bit leaned more on the oral histories because so much wasn't written down to you at that time.
So why do you think it's relevant today?
Oh gosh, I think that one is so relevant with Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine, and then looking today at the Wall Street Journal reporter who's just been essentially kidnapped in Russia and is being held hostage. Brittany Griner. I mean, there's this whole POW issue, it's a little bit different because they're not in a prisoner of war camp, but hostages, you know, continue to be taken all over the world. And it's really, and it's also with communism, you know, very similar kind of situation. So I find it extremely topical for that reason. And also for the keep quiet, go public policy, which I talk about in the book, which was for these military wives to keep quiet, say nothing about what had happened to their husbands. And they choose to go public eventually after several years of getting our government ignoring these men and doing nothing. So, you know, a lot of echoes now with like the Me Too movement, things like that, you know, women being told to keep quiet, but finally being forced to go public even when they don't want to get media attention.
And this book has gotten some interest from Hollywood.
Yes.
Reese Witherspoon, and
Yes.
but that hasn't moved forward yet. So are you still shopping it around?
Yes, it did. Reese had it for about 3 years, and unfortunately, I think with COVID and everything, it did not get made, but we are hoping to resell it. We're always, talking to people about that. I think one day it will get made, and I would love to see it as a series. I think because it's over about 10 years, it would be nice to have a little more time than just, say, a 2-hour movie. But I'm hopeful. I think someday it'll get picked up again.
Well, you'll have to keep us posted on that.
Definitely.
And thank you so much for being with us, Heath. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you can find Heath's contact information on our website at sisterhoodofthesecond-act.com. Up next, a gym without mirrors seems unheard of. Body positivity and the focus at Hustle Haven. That story coming up.
I'm going to be an oak tree.
I think I'll be a dogwood tree.
My kids say they be looking for a thorny tree from me.
With Evergreen, you can be a tree. Our biodegradable urn combines your ashes, natural soil additives, and a native tree of your choice. Be a tree and grow for tomorrow.
I want to be a tree.
Learn more at evergreenmemorialtrust.com.
Once again from the Fox Radio Roanoke studios, Sisterhood of the Second Act.
Welcome back to Sisterhood of the Second Act. I'm Denise Allen Membreno. Hot yoga and cycling changed London Ray-Dykstra's life by improving her health, attitude, and outlook. It was a move to Roanoke from Richmond that precipitated what would become Hustle Haven. And London Ray-Dykstra joins us now to talk about the philosophy behind Hustle Haven and why creating it was a necessity. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I've been to Hustle Haven. I love the atmosphere. But first, let's start with your background. So give us why was yoga and cycling so important to you at that point in your life?
Yeah, so I had always been moving my body because I was a dancer. So I started dancing when I was 3. I continued to dance all the way through college, and I taught dance. But I'd never really made the connection of how important it was for me to move my body with my mental health. You had always heard that exercise, it produces endorphins and whatnot, but I just never connected those two things. So in my late 20s, I had quit dancing. I'd quit teaching dance. I sold my soul to a corporate job where I sat at a desk all the time. And at the same time, 3 really traumatic things happened kind of back to back in my life. And I really had no way to cope except unhealthy coping skills, like eating for comfort, lots of carbs, lots of ice cream, too much wine. I wasn't moving my body, and it was just creating this anxiety spiral into depression. And again, at that time, I hadn't connected how important it was for me to move my body for my mental health, and that I wasn't doing that because I wasn't dancing anymore. So actually, it was my doctor that spoke up and said, you've got to make some changes in your life. You're overweight, your cholesterol's so high, I should medicate you, and you're
young too.
I was young, and my anxiety was out of control. And so she actually put me on a plan, and exercise didn't come until later, which was interesting because I had always associated exercise, like going to the gym, with weight loss, which is why, I don't know, it just didn't appeal to me. And when I brought that up to her, she said, actually, we're going to bring the physical fitness in later, but it's actually going to be for your mental health. And sure enough, she was right. So I just started with things that I had dabbled with in the past because they were complementary to dance, like yoga and bar. And I cycled a few times, but I started slow. And the things that I latched on to were hot yoga. That really seemed to change my mental health in such a tremendous way. Even though I started, in my mind, I thought it was going for physical health as well, but it changed my mental health like the doctor said it would. And then I needed something else. I needed something a little more energetic. So I went back to cycling because they actually were recruiting dancers to teach, because dancers have they have rhythm, you know, musicality, and so that's how I got back into that.
I never would have thought of that, dancing and cycling, but that is really interesting.
Yeah, well, for rhythm cycling.
Yeah.
There are two different types of indoor cycling. You have power, which is mostly for training for people that, you know, bike on the road or mountain bike during the season. And then off season, they do power training. And then you have rhythm-based cycling, which is, it's kind of has a love-hate relationship in that world, so.
That's very interesting. And what a great doctor you had.
Yes,
That's, you know, that said, no, we'll wait for that. I want you to focus on food, and then we'll do that for your mental health. 'Cause I think a lot of people are like you. They don't, you know, want to exercise for good health. There has to be another reason to do it.
Yeah, and you know, in other times when I had exercised, you know, it was always at the urging of a coach or something, and it was to be a certain size. And then kind of once you get to that size, you get a little, you know, a little loosey-goosey with stuff. And so that wasn't enough of a motivator for me to keep it going. And that doctor also is the one that introduced me to adaptogens, which is part of the inspiration for the Potion Bar, which is in Hustle Haven.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so you moved to Roanoke from Richmond. What did you find when you got here, and how did it lead to Hustle Haven?
So I was dating my then boyfriend, now husband at the time. He would be in Richmond to visit me, and he'd take classes with me, whether he was taking my cycle class or coming to yoga with me. He knew how important those were to me because they really got me to a better place. A more confident place, less anxiety, a place of self-love. And that really made me the person that I was, that could receive such a healthy, supportive relationship with him. So when I was visiting him, I would often ask, where are your cycle studios or hot yoga specific? And they didn't exist. They had at certain times, but they didn't. And that was really anxiety inducing for me to move here because I'd become so dependent on them. So my husband was already a member at a big box gym, like a corporate gym. And so we started going there. So we'd at least have some outlet. And actually the first week I officially moved here, I asked them if they needed cycle instructors. And they said, yeah, can you teach on Thursday? So I hadn't even lived here a week and I started teaching there.
And we are talking with London Ray-Dykstra. She's the owner and founder of Hustle Haven. So tell us, it's a new concept basically for Roanoke. Tell us about it. How's it different?
So I think from traditional gyms, if you will, or boutique fitness studios, our entire focus is what we say, physical fitness for your mind, not your physique. You go into a lot of gyms or other boutique fitness studios, and what I mean by that are studios that solely focus on, you know, one modality, whether it's they're just a bar studio or yoga or whatnot. And you'll see a lot of inspirational photos, or I'll say aspirational photos of certain bodies and whatnot. And they talk a lot about cutting inches and toning things, and that is all true. Those things happen when you move your body. But they really happen more quickly when you focus on what you're putting in your body. And I just didn't want that to be the sticking point for people. Because again, I think the focus is on something that doesn't really define who you are. You could get to that size. You could cut those inches, you could lose those pounds, but you still may not be happy.
Right.
And again, for me, it was something that once I got to those points, I would kind of slack off. And then I'd find myself back in a place of...
You're doing that yo-yo thing.
Yes, yes. So for me, when my focus kept being, let's focus on my mental health because this helps with my anxiety and my confidence, that's what kept me coming back and keeps me coming back. And so when I had this opportunity to create something that didn't exist because there were no standalone cycle studios or hot yoga only studios, I said, well, I'm going to make this a place that I would want to go to.
Because I was surprised when I walked through and there are no mirrors.
Yeah.
You know, that is amazing. And I know you told me this is not a gym.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. That's important because I know what happens to people when there are mirrors. And it's a bit of a controversial thing. People that work in the fitness industry like to have mirrors because it allows people to see their alignment. Mm-hmm. In our rhythm-based cycling classes, it allows people to see if they're on the same beat as other people. But I find that people, myself included, get obsessed with what they see in the mirror. And I wanted people to focus on how they feel inside. So in our yoga classes, our main focus is on cueing. How can we cue people better so that they can feel it in their body? As opposed to, sometimes you might see how one person is doing something and you try to do that with your body, but bodies are not the same.
Right.
Even your own body, it's asymmetrical. So you should be able to feel, if we can talk about what to engage muscle-wise or the alignment of certain joints, I feel like that gets you to a better place and understanding.
And you're making them get in touch with their body.
More body awareness.
More than seeing it in the mirror, you're actually, saying, how is this feeling to you?
Exactly.
So that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about the potions bar when you were talking earlier. Talk about that. Explain why you have a potions bar. What is it? What can people get there?
So again, I didn't want to create. Originally, it was just going to be a cycle studio named Hustle, but I told my husband, I can't, I teach cycle, but I love to practice yoga, so I don't feel as if I'm qualified to open a yoga studio. But for me, it's the yin and the yang. It's the intensity of cycle, the loud music, the crazy lights, and then this other side of yoga, which is light and airy and focused on breath and body awareness. And I said, but I don't want it to just be a gym. I don't want it to feel like that. I need this to feel like a social place, almost like a co-working space meets a cafe meets, these other options. So adaptogens are they became part of my life. Those are roots, mushrooms, herbs that have been used in ancient medicine for thousands of years, and they helped your body adapt to certain stressors. So that doctor that I had introduced me to ashwagandha originally to help with my anxiety as opposed to putting me on some type of medication. Right. And I started integrating those things into my life. And when I moved to Roanoke and I would make my drinks, if you will, that included ashwagandha or saffron latte, my husband would say, are you making one of your potions? Which I found hilarious. And so I just kind of adopted it. And when we wanted to integrate a cafe into the studio to show people how they can use adaptogens in their life, because if we just sold these products,
right, you don't know what to do with them.
You don't know what to do with it. So to show people how they could use them was really important to me. And yeah, we knew it was going to be adaptogenic based, so we called it a potion bar.
And one final question for you, because you mentioned about how you wanted it to be a community space.
Yeah.
And I know, so why was it important for you? You do community conversations where you tackle all sorts of issues and invite the public to come in and listen to these panel discussions. Why was it important to you to put that community element into your business?
Well, again, bringing this back to not wanting it to just be a gym, which I know is the easiest way to define it. I wanted it to be a place that brought people awareness of their wellness in general. People say health is wealth. And your wellness is not just, a blood panel or going to see a therapist every week. There's so much involved in the complete wellness of somebody, from your sexual health to your mental health to your financial health. I mean, talk about how stressful money can be, especially in an economy right now. And most importantly, your community health. We are communal creatures. When your community is not well, how can you be well? So I wanted to be a place where we could be a catalyst and just start conversations for people so that they could feel comfortable. So maybe hot yoga's not their thing. Maybe cycling's not their thing. Maybe they think adaptogens taste funny or weird, but the one thing we can offer them are different conversations, and some might apply to their life and some might just be interesting. So
Well, we've been talking with London Ray-Dykstra. She's the owner of Hustle Haven here in Roanoke, and we thank you so much for coming in today. And it's such a unique business.
Thank you so much, and thank you for highlighting the business and bringing awareness to mental health and the whole self.
Oh, we appreciate it. It's been our honor. Thank you. And we'll be back to wrap up the show after this. And just a reminder, you can find information for Hustle Haven on our website in the show notes at sisterhoodofthesecond-act.com.
Looking for your first home or retirement home? Realtor Monica Nicely can help you find it. Whether you're moving in or out of the Roanoke region, call Monica 540-449-2019, 540-449-2019. Alcova Mortgage Loan Officer Jonathan Sweat helps you seal the deal with the loan to suit your needs with great rates and terms. Call Jonathan 540-314-8843, 540-314-8843.
Alcova Mortgage, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID number 40508, MLSConsumerAccess.org. Terms and conditions apply. All loans subject to credit approval.
I would like to thank Heath Hardage Lee and London Ray-Dykstra for joining us today. From Heath, we learned that previously untold history can make a great story. And London taught us that the mental health benefits of exercise are just as important as the physical well-being it provides. I'm Denise Allen Membrano. Join us next week for another edition of Sisterhood of the Second Act.